Hey there, old souls, it's Dr. J, and I'm back on the water today. So this week I've been thinking a lot about the big picture. Last week we talked about concepts of God and why we need to get beyond our limiting thoughts and beliefs so that we can have a more direct and unfiltered relationship with our source, with the power that all things come from and all things contain. And of course, because this sort of mysterious, ineffable, indescribable force is all those things, it makes it so complicated to name. And the problem with being human is that anything we have a strong feeling about, anything we personalize, anything that feels deeply personal, we also emotionalize, which means we don't like when other people disagree. We don't like when our view feels threatened. And well, you get the idea. Well, where this thinking took me was from the power of having a relationship with a greater force in your life. And probably there's going to be a lot of wind in this video, but that's the consequence of this spectacular view so early in the morning, which is why I'm barely awake. It reminded me that one of the great powers or benefits or blessings of a deep relationship with the divine is that we remember that the universal mind lives inside us. The mind of the universe, the design of the universe, the very vantage point and view of the universe itself lives inside us. And that means that no matter what we're going through, yes, we may have our kind of conditional, socially driven life, developed habits and patterns of view and belief and behavior. And yes, we also have our deeper, soulful views and behaviors, the longings and promptings of the innermost authentic self. But there is this deeper place inside us all that I feel provides the healing perspective, the holding presence that contains all the other views of our life. And that is the universal perspective. That's the universal mind that lives inside us. Well, what does that mean in any real or practical way? Well, what it means is that as we connect with the divine in our lives, what we feel is expansion, right? We feel that universal perspective connects us with the universe, whereas the self-oriented perspective, what many traditions and people would call the ego's perspective, is very narrow and self-referencing. It's really a kind of survival consciousness. Now, I don't think we need to get rid of the ego. I don't think that is actually something that works for most of our lives. You know, I was watching a wonderful video by Eckhart Tolle, who I've actually never read or really listened to very much, and I've decided I think I need to, because he seems pretty awesome. But I have to say, as awesome as he is, I do wonder from time to time how he would handle having kids or a job or divorce, things like that. And from what I understand is that, earlier in his life, he didn't handle any of those things very well at all. Now, this isn't an attack on Eckhart Tolle. I think he's a genius. But what I'm talking about is that I think it's fair to be honest that there is a great demand that we expect of ourselves when we seek to live both in the narrow world and the universal world. Many of our great masters, and I'm including him certainly, who are able to live in that more expansive mind and worldview, well, they create a life that allows them to stay connected to the universal. And there's lots of ways you can do that. Well, maybe not lots of ways. There's some ways you can do that. For me, even though I still struggle with that swing between contraction and expansion, I find that being near nature and being constantly surrounded by nature, vast forests, great oceans, and all these elements, that's what connects me to the universe and the universal mind. But the other thing that works is spaciousness. So there are people who choose, like monks and mystics and masters of all kinds, that choose just to have less in their lives. So there's less people in their lives, less relationships, less responsibilities, and arguably less stuff. And that's another way to connect with space and expansion. So I think the first part of what I'm inviting you to consider today is how often do you return to the universal mind when you're facing the particular challenges and limits of your life. The second thing that I'm inviting you to consider is how do you cultivate a regular return to that universal mind? What are you doing? Are you eliminating things in your life? Are you creating space in your environment or in your relational world? Do you have rituals or ceremonies or practices that can help you in your work life or in your home life that keep pulling you out of the contraction? But the third thing that I wanted to move to and maybe finish with, since it's a little cold today and windy, probably noisy for you. The third thing is to remember that the dance between contraction and expansion is the nature of life itself, which means even though expansion brings us into deep relationship with the divine, it doesn't necessarily mean by definition that contraction is wrong or bad or makes you less of a person or less lovable. It just makes things more difficult. It just makes things more emotionally challenging. But there's no innate value to expansion or contraction. Both of these things exist within the universe, within the universal mind. And so the work is to hold it all with love and with patience and with curiosity. And to notice when you swing to contraction, just as much as I'm asking you to notice when and where you can find yourself connecting with the universal mind or expansion. The more we become aware of this ebb and flow, like the tide going out and coming back in, like the winter yielding to spring, like the night yielding to day, all these things are actually happening right now around me. The more we realize that struggle, what we often call that struggle in our life, is really just our participation in the universe, in the very laws of nature that are around us, in the very laws of physics that govern and guide us, the same forces that gave birth to the stars and the planets. These are the same forces that are at work inside us right now, expanding, contracting, expanding, contracting. So I welcome you to spend your days in balance. Find a way to live rooted in the universal mind and then move into the narrowing consciousness or the contracted consciousness when you need it, as you need it, and be patient when it doesn't go so well. Be patient when it's a struggle. Move back to the universal mind and then look at your narrowing. Look at your contraction with love, with forgiveness, and maybe even with a certain kind of joyful revelry, if you can imagine what that means. That you are like the ocean, that you are like the stars, you are like the trees. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. We can drop the labels and layers of judgment and just be in awe of this experience. Do your best. Learn every day. Find that balance between the universal and the personal, the expansion and the contraction, and see what unfolds from there. Because in that awakening and in that balance point between the two, we find a kind of magic that brings us peace and power and an experience of self that we can't even describe. But it makes life extraordinary and worth every moment. See you soon.